Hi, my name is Sean Lee. I am here, sophomore at UNC Chapel Hill, and today I am going to try to give you guys information about the clothing and festivals of the UK because I studied there abroad last semester. There's a wide variety of people watching this right now from elementary school all the way to high school, so I'm going to try to incorporate language and ideas and knowledge to fit everyone, and hopefully everyone will enjoy it. So, festivals and clothing of the UK. I'm going to start off by going through some clothing for back in the olden days, starting with the Elizabethan era. I'm just going to quickly point out some unique clothing that males and females wore during that time. For males, as you can see in the picture, they were quite dressed up. This is probably more of a upper class and more wealthier male. And some interesting clothing items that he's wearing includes breeches, which are the outer garment. So you can see kind of like a skirt-like clothing that covers from his waist to his knees. Then you have the doublet, which is the button-up kind of like jacket that he wears on top. It usually is very fitting, so to his form, pretty tight around his chest area. And then stockings, which are really interesting because you don't see males wear stockings in these days, but they're the very thin, textured, very tight around the legs, usually wear underneath the clothing, and it could come in different colors, white or black or etc. Female clothing include gowns, which are the big dress, the big outer layer, puffy dress kind of clothing. The petticoat, which is worn underneath to make kind of it looks bigger on from the chest, from the waist area and down to make it look puffier and like a wider hip, wider waist. And then you have the corset, which maybe some of you guys have heard of, which is used a lot for females in the olden days, which was to tighten the waist to make it look smaller and have a smaller shape for females because it was more attractive back then to have a very small waist. And this usually led to some medical problems because it was so tight on the female that was unnatural. But that's what they did because it was the social norm back then to wear that. Excuse me. Sorry. And then some clothing like that continued on, but as you can see, Victorian era, they kind of changed. You can see that the males changed their clothing. They wear hats. They stopped wearing stockings. They have pants or trousers now. Female clothing shedded some layers. There's more skin shown, and continues from there. And so these types of clothing sometimes are where you can see them in shows, your old English shows, or sometimes on a festival called Guy Fawkes Day or Bonfire Night. They will wear costumes, including these olden day costumes, and they will parade around with torches. And this is to celebrate the burning of Guy Fawkes because Guy Fawkes tried to set the parliament on fire, but he failed to do so, and therefore the king decided to celebrate this day from now on that he did not succeed in burning the parliament. And now I want to transition to the Scottish. Scotland is part of the UK, but the Scottish have a very interesting and unique tradition. As you can probably heard from or know that they have the plaid patterns and the kilts and such. So I'm going to go into depth with some of this. As you can see that there is female clothing and male clothing. So I'll start with the female. Excuse my pronunciation, I might not pronounce this right, but erisad is a traditional white piece of clothing that the females wear that is usually wear underneath. You can see on the women in the picture, the white on top. It's more of a full body clothing, and then usually comes with a belt or silver or brass belt to represent like where she's from or the history that she has. A tartan pattern is just the plaid pattern, the crisscross pattern that you see, that we wear today, even with some of the clothes we have. And for male clothing, we have the kilt, which is a skirt-like clothing that goes from the waist to the knees, traditionally worn on males. And it is closely tied with just the history and the culture of the Scottish. The sporran, which is the little pouch in the front, is used as a pocket because the kilt doesn't have any pockets, so they needed to put some of their stuff in something, and so they decided to use a pouch like that. I'll show you guys a video of this festival I'm going to talk about later, but it's the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo Festival, which is held. Okay, what is it? It is the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo, which is a series of music or displayed performances by military, such as the British Armed Forces, Commonwealth, and international military bands. So this festival or performance is extremely popular throughout the world. They have different military groups coming from all over the world to perform. Where is it located? It is in Edinburgh, which is the capital of Scotland. And they have a castle in the middle of the city that they perform this on, which they have a big opening area, Common Promenade, that they perform on. Who is it that is performing? These are military participants who musically, they play the pipes, the drums. There's a lot of different instruments that are used during their performances, and people who watch include just everyone in the world. Is quite a big performance. And it is celebrated annually in August, but it's actually part of a bigger festival called the Edinburgh Festival. And the Edinburgh Festival includes sorts of different performances, music, dances, etc. So it's just a show that you'll see later in the video of just musical performances. There's international dances and performances, and there's the traditional Scottish dances that are performed. So that gives you an idea of what kind of performances go on. But that is the end of my presentation. So if you have any questions, if you want to put it into the Q&A chat box, I'll be glad to answer them. Okay. Well, thank you for listening. Now we're going to have another presenter here.
It's still delayed. Hi everyone, I'm Zaynab and I'm currently a freshman here at UNC Chapel Hill. I was born in Iraq, and when I was about 1 year old, we moved around through the Middle East to Yemen and Jordan, and then finally when I was 4, we moved to the States. So I have a lot of Arabic culture in me, and I have grown up with it, and I really think it's interesting to share it with you all. And like Sean said, you guys are all different ages and different age groups, so I think it's important for you guys to be exposed to it, and I hope you enjoy this presentation. And it's also on clothing in that area in the Middle East. We are talking about Arabic fashion and clothing, and just to clarify, the Middle East encompasses the region around Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Northern Africa, and areas kind of north of Iraq like Syria, Israel, Palestine, etc. So just to begin, I'd like to clarify that there are a lot of different fashions for men and women. A lot of them are mostly centered on women because men's fashion in the Middle East is usually just very casual and similar to what you see in the West, but they do also have some distinctions. So for women, one very prominent attire in that area is called a kaftan, which is a traditional apparel, and it is basically just a giant gown, and some of them have longer sleeves for the more conservative look, and some of them have shorter sleeves like you see on the right. And mostly what this is used for is that in that area, as you all probably know, it's very hot and arid. So it's very good for being able to walk around in the city, being able to have pliability and also feel very natural. You wouldn't really want to wear anything heavy in that area because temperatures don't typically drop very low, especially during the day. Another very common characteristic in that area is a hijab, and it is a veil that covers the head and chest, and it's mostly worn by Muslim women. And what this is for is just to have a more modest look for them. And some of them take on, again, a more conservative look. So on the left, it's black, it's dark, and it's just very plain. And then others, especially recently in the most recent years, have taken on a more colorful look and have had more designs and have been a lot more fashionable, I guess you could say. And usually the more fashionable ones are, of course, worn by the younger women and the younger generation. So, I mean, in my family, mostly my grandma wears a more conservative look with it and keeps it very plain, whereas some of the younger women like to have colors and designs on them. And it's honestly just what you prefer. Similar to the hijab is something called a niqab, and this is mostly worn by, again, very conservative women, especially in Saudi Arabia and the Persian Gulf area. This is a lot more popular, and this is a veil that covers the head, chest, and face, and everything except the eyes. And in these areas, for some areas, it's a lot to have either a hijab or a niqab on. So this is why it's worn. And again, it's honestly just preference. Some women prefer to wear this type of style, and then other women prefer to just have a hijab. And in certain areas where a hijab or niqab is not a law, if some women opt to not wear it at all, which is also perfectly fine. Another very popular piece of clothing that women especially wear, men can wear it too, is something called a kusha, which is a shoe, and it's mostly popular in the India and Pakistan area, which isn't really considered the Middle East, but these types of shoes are still very popular in the Middle East. And they are made of leather or textile, and they're embroidered with brass nails, and they have shells, mirrors, and bells on them. And I'm sure all of you have seen Aladdin, and I think all of you know the type of shoes he wears are similar to the one on the right. And these are the kushas. And mostly women, of course, wear the more designer embellished ones that have, the intricate designs and the shine on them and everything. And of course, some of them take on a more plain role, and then others take on a more designer type look. So now moving on to more of the men design. They usually, men, especially in Libya and also in the Persian Gulf area, which is Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and the Emirates, wear something called a thobe. And in Arabic, thobe literally just means a big robe. And what it is exactly what it means. It's just a giant robe that men wear. And again, this is also to take into account the area, which is very hot and dry and arid. And it's mostly worn, of course, by men. Women, they have ones for women too, as you saw on the kusha. They look very similar, but this one's just for men. And what they're used for is that it's a way to cover themselves up while also having the material not be very heavy, and it's also very light and you're able to move around in it. Especially if you get to the Northern Africa region, you're kind of getting near the Sahara, especially in Morocco, and it's very important that you don't get really, really exhausted and hot in that area, especially if you work in that area. And I'm sure most of you have seen on TV, or it's been seen by a lot of men, that they wear something called the gotra, which is a headdress similar to a hijab that's worn by Arabic men. And this is mostly seen in Saudi Arabia and the Persian Gulf area, again, the Emirates, Qatar, Kuwait, etc. And what it is just a headdress that is worn by men, and the little black circle on top of it is called the agal. And what this is used for is that if you're working in areas where it's dry, dust and sand and everything can get in your face, so it's very important that your face is protected and your mouth is protected, especially so you don't get hurt or super exhausted when working there. And again, this is mostly worn by the Saudi Arabian, Persian Gulf area. So of course, men in other areas wear it too, and men also in that area also don't wear it. So it just depends on what they prefer. And to kind of conclude it is just some general characteristics that are in, what my family tends to wear, and then also what is popularized on TV. For women especially, usually the trend is that nothing is too tight and it's very loose and not very form-fitting, and that can be due to different reasons. One being that it is very hot there, so you wouldn't really want anything sticking to your skin for a long time. And then at the same time, a lot of them want to remain modest and want to not have anything that really shows their figure off too much. Another characteristic is like I said, embroidery and intricacy of a lot of these designs, and it's just very popular in that area. Lots of jewelry for sure, and it's usually gold. So in my family, again, we have just a lot of, if we're going to buy jewelry, it's usually going to be gold, and it just tends to be the culture there. And then, as I said earlier, modesty is just very important to a lot of women especially. And at the same time, there have been advancements in women's fashion in the past few years. So what has been seen in American fashion has been going over there recently. So before, women wouldn't really wear t-shirts and jeans, which seems kind of silly, but now, especially through, globalization and the media, it's been able to reach them. And a lot of Western fashion has been able to reach them as well. So how do you stop the screen share? Oh, here it is. And I'm just going to finish off and just show you guys. I brought it from home. And this is a typical hijab. And it's honestly it looks like a giant scarf, but it's able to fit a woman's head, and it has to cover her hair too if she's going to wear it. And it has to be wrapped in a certain way, and there have to be pins and needles going everywhere. And then this is the gotra I was telling you all about, and usually it's in this design. They're usually what's seen as a white type of cloth, or it's usually this type of pattern. And I think this has just been the norm in the past few years, which is why this pattern is seen as the most fashionable, especially for men. So if you all have any questions, feel free to ask it in the Q&A. All right, well, thank you all. And again, if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them and get back to you all on them. We have another presentation coming up, so I hope you guys enjoy them and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Hey, my name is Timber.
And I'm Clara.
And we're going to be presenting about Chile. Chile and
Argentina.
And we're going to be talking about the most popular sport in Chile and Argentina, which is soccer. Football.
And I think there's a lag, so if you guys want to type in questions in the Q&A, just sort of as you have the questions, then once we get to the end, maybe the questions will get to us and we can answer it then.
Yeah. Alrighty. So first we're going to talk about Chile. So in your classrooms, I want you to brainstorm very briefly about the popular sports that we play in the United States. And if you want to type them into the Q&A, you can, but just talk about it just very shortly with your classmates. So I'm sure as y'all were talking, you mentioned probably the big three in the United States, which is basketball, baseball, and football. And I'm sure a lot of you guys play soccer as well. But as far as like the teams that people in the US really like to watch, these are the really, really popular ones. However, in Latin America and in Chile, the most popular sport to watch is soccer or football. So I'm going to tell y'all a little bit about Chile's national team. So they've had a national team since 1895. So that's over 120 years of soccer, which is why it's so popular, because it's been such a long-standing cultural tradition. The Chile's national team has a nickname, and it's called La Roja, which means the red in Spanish. And Chile's national colors are red, white, and blue. And their jerseys are often red, as you can see in the pictures. So that's where the nickname comes from. And if you look at the picture at the bottom right, you'll see the player standing with a woman, and that is President Michelle. She's the president of Chile. So Chile has appeared in 9 World Cups, and the World Cup happens every 4 years, just like the Olympics. But in Latin American countries, the World Cup is arguably much more popular than the Olympics. So in 1962, Chile actually hosted the World Cup, and they placed 3rd overall, which is the best they've ever done. And so Chile's national team ranks as one of the top 25 national soccer teams in the world, and they haven't won a professional international soccer tournament yet. The 3rd place in 1962 is about as close as they've gotten, but they are very consistent in tournaments, and still very, very popular to watch. So as you can see from the pictures, there's fans. They get very loud and crazy, like to chant and cheer, just like we like to cheer for our basketball teams or our football teams. So we're going to watch a video at the end, so we'll come back to that. But right now, I want you to brainstorm in your classrooms the popular players that you watch in college basketball or NBA or the NFL or football, baseball, swimming, any popular players that you can name or that you like to watch. If you want to talk about them in your classroom, and you can post them in the Q&A chat. So I'm sure you guys mentioned some big ones. For me, popular players that I think of are Marcus Page for UNC. That's where I go to school. There's some other big ones like Derek Jeter for baseball, football. There's I don't watch football, I guess, as much. Yeah, Tom Brady. Some big ones like that. But in Chile, there's 2 really very popular players. And the first one is Arturo Vidal, and he's a midfielder, and here's his picture. His nickname is the Warrior. He plays very aggressively and is very praised for his technique in soccer. And it was his uncle who first spotted his talent and encouraged him to pursue a professional career, which worked out very well for him. He's one of the best players, arguably, on Chile's team, and lots of people really like to cheer for him. So the second most popular player is Alexis Sanchez, and he is a forward, which means he does a lot of the goal scoring and goal attempts. He played for the Barcelona club team, and he currently plays for Arsenal in addition to playing for the Chilean national team. And when he signed for Barcelona, he was the most expensive transfer in Chilean soccer history. He has played in 2 World Cups, and he's praised for his quickness and technical ability and his creativity in play. So now I want to show you guys a picture of when I was in Chile. Chile played Spain in the World Cup, and they won 0-2. And so after the game, everybody crowded into the town square there. And were cheering and chanting. They were on the roofs. They were honking their car horns. and just really celebrating their win, and just kind of goes to show how big of a deal it was. And I was also, when I was down there in Chile, I was doing service work in like a children's home there. And I was working with like lots of little babies, and the children's home was run by Catholic nuns. And it was really funny and really surprising to me how like into it the nuns also got. They would play the games during the baby's nap time on TVs in the baby's room. And they would cheer really loudly when they won. They were blowing horns. They were wearing the like Chilean scarves. And a lot of times the babies would wake up because everybody, all the workers and the nuns were cheering so loudly. So soccer is just really ingrained in like every aspect of the culture in Chile. So while I was down there also, Chile borders Argentina, and Argentina is really good at soccer. And a lot of Chileans really don't like the Argentinian soccer team because they're so good. So there's a bit of a rivalry. They're pretty close. It's kind of like a Carolina Duke rivalry. And so Clara is going to talk to us more about Argentina's soccer team. But for right now, we're going to watch a very brief soccer clip. And if you have any questions, feel free to type them into the Q&A chat bar. And hold on with me 1 second while I switch over to the video. There we go. All right. Just this video.
Chile played in the very first FIFA World Cup in 1930. In 2010, they progressed from the group stage for only the second time since 1962. And nobody won more matches during South American qualification than Jorge Sampaoli's team.
Significa jugar 2 mundiales consecutivos, que en Chile no estaban tan acostumbrados. Jugar un mundial en Brasil seguramente que va a poblar de muchos chilenos que van a acercarse a ver la participación de su equipo. El compromiso nuestro de representar una bandera en el torneo más importante del mundo, y de los jugadores que también van a tener que estar a la altura de competir con los mejores.
Pienso que puede ser la sorpresa del mundial, pero la demás gente que no conoce la selección puede pensar que podemos quedar eliminados al tiro, pero pienso que podemos hacer cosas importantes en el mundial.
Okey-dokey. So if you have any questions, feel free to type them in the chat while Claire's presenting, and I can answer them. I wanted to show y'all really quickly the soccer scarves that I was talking about. People wear these kind of like we wear jerseys, and they wear jerseys also, especially Vidal's and Sanchez's jerseys. A lot of kids have them, but a lot of people have these soccer scarves, and they just wear them like this, and they cheer for them.
When they get really excited, they hold them up in the air.
Yeah, and like really get into it. So yeah, that's a little bit about Chile's team, and now we'll talk about Argentina's.
So, like Timur said, there is a rivalry between Argentina and Chile, but so I'm sure you all know the World Cup was last year, and to be honest, Argentina wasn't that worried about Chile. They were more focused on Brazil, but most of the time there is a rivalry. So, in Argentina, like in Chile, football is incredibly important, and especially during the World Cup. I was in Argentina during the World Cup, and that was basically all anyone talked about all of the time. But so when a World Cup isn't on, or when the national team isn't playing, the most important game of the year is the Super Clásico, and it's a match between the team Boca Juniors and River Plate. Both of these teams, they're like club teams. So if you know like Manchester or Arsenal or Barcelona or one of those, it's like the same type of thing. They're both from Buenos Aires, and they actually both started in the same neighborhood of Buenos Aires. It was called La Boca. That's how Boca Juniors got its name. However, in a very long time ago, I think in like 1925, River Plate moved to another neighborhood, and they actually moved to, like, their stadium was right outside where I went to school. in Argentina. But the neighborhood they moved to was a lot wealthier, a lot more affluent people lived there, whereas Boca Juniors were in a more working class neighborhood. So the Boca Juniors fans like to say that the River Plate fans are very like stuck up and full of themselves, and so there's a very strong rivalry between them. The fans of both teams are actually all sorts of people. Like, the stereotypes aren't actually true, but people like to just keep saying that, you know, as part of the rivalry. But when World Cup is on, or when Argentina, the national team, is playing, that sort of takes supreme importance in Argentina. Now, can anyone guess who the most important player in Argentina is? I'm sure a lot of people have heard of him. I know my little brothers like to talk about him all the time. So this player is Lionel Messi. I'm sure everyone's heard of him. He's a lot of people call him the best soccer player in the world. So in Argentina, they had this sort of, well, Pepsi, I think, started it. It was sort of a campaign to say that, like, we don't have an adjective that describes how good of a soccer player Messi is. So we just need to come up with a new word to talk about how good Messi is. And these ads were all over the city before and during the World Cup. And so the word they came up with was impresionante, which is sort of like a pun in Spanish, because impresionante means impressive. So impresionante is sort of like Messi impressive. And this didn't end up just being a advertising thing. Shoot, I lost on my. There was actually a dictionary that decided to put this word in their dictionary. It wasn't one of the biggest dictionary companies, but a smaller dictionary decided that impresionante should go in the dictionary. And they defined it as like an adjective referring to Messi and his perfect manner of playing football. And he can always outdo himself. And they say he's the best soccer player of all time. And there are definitely some Argentinians that agree with this. So during the World Cup, like I said, everyone is always watching the games, especially when Argentina is playing. This is a picture that I took from my school I went to. So this is the cafeteria in the school. And usually the cafeteria was like kind of empty. Like, there'd be a couple people eating lunch. But when Argentina was playing, all of a sudden, everyone in the school crowded to the cafeteria because there was a TV there. Actually, you know, I think they put the TV in just for the World Cup. I don't think that was there before. And then the city was also very into making sure, you know, the World Cup was a big thing for the city. They put up these giant screens. You can see this right in the middle here. It's a huge screen in the middle of a park in Buenos Aires. And there was like a couple parks throughout the city which had these big screens. And they played almost all the games, I think. And people would go and watch games and sit outside and, you know, dress up to support Argentina. And then, so this is a picture of the Avenida 9 de Julio, which is actually the widest avenue in the world. So it's a really, really big street. And you can see it's completely full of people. And what's even more interesting is that this is after Argentina lost. So they were still this excited about football that they all went and crowded the street even after their team lost. So if anybody watched the World Cup, they know that Argentina got to the final game and they lost that game. So when I was traveling in Argentina, I was traveling in the north, up like in the mountains, and one of my tour guides told us a story about why Argentina lost, because they've also lost a couple other World Cups, like in very close matches. And he said that the Argentina team is cursed. So he was telling us about this curse. And in 1986, Argentina was going to the World Cup, and they had another one of their most famous players on the team. This guy right on the right here, his name is Maradona. And he's considered like one of the most important people in Argentine history. That's why in this neighborhood in La Boca, where I talked about the two club teams were from, this is a picture from that area. And these are some of the most important people in Argentine history. The wife of a former president, a very famous musician, and Maradona. I actually did not know who Maradona was at first. I thought everyone was talking about Madonna, the singer, and I was very confused for a long time. But eventually I figured it out. And he is actually now the coach of the current Argentine team. But anyway, to go back to the curse. In 1986, when Maradona was playing on the national team, they sort of had like a lot of like practice and training before they went to the World Cup. And they went to the north of Argentina in the Andes. So it's like really high altitude. And, you know, if you go up in the mountains, it sort of gets harder to breathe. There's less oxygen. So a lot of athletes will go there to train so that they get in better shape for when they, you know, go back down to lower altitudes. So the team went up there to train. And they went to this little town. It's called Clara. And for fun, they decided to play against the town, the team of the town of Clara. So like, if you're from like a town, do you have like there might be like a league in your town that plays soccer. So it's like that sort of thing, just like a little casual team. And the Argentine national team plays against this team and they lose. So they were like, we are not ready to go to the World Cup if we can't beat this team. So they decided to stay in Clara and train there to get in really good shape to be prepared for the World Cup. So while they were there, they made this promise. They were like, all right, if we win the World Cup, then we are all going to come back to this town and celebrate with the people of this town. And they did end up winning the World Cup, except none of the players ever went back to visit the town. So now they say that the Argentine team is cursed and that they won't win another World Cup since they didn't go back. Okay. And I skipped over the video before. I wanted to show you. There was this song that somebody started for the World Cup this year. And they talk about, you know, some of the stuff I told you about, like Maradona and Brazil. And throughout the World Cup, during the whole time of the World Cup, you could hear people singing this song just any time of the day, like just walking down the street. Okay. And they say it, they sing it over and over. So I'm going to go to, and it, the subtitles change languages. So I'm going to go to the English one and we can listen to just a little bit. All right, so that just shows they sing this all the time, like really all the time. And they like to make fun of Brazil while they were playing against Brazil. So now we're going to check if we have any more questions coming in.
One is, why is soccer so popular there?
Why is soccer so popular? It might just be from the history. Like soccer is really the biggest sport that's been there, and they've been playing soccer for a very long time. And I guess in most countries, there hasn't been another sport that's sort of like also come around to take a bigger role. Like in the US, so we have like baseball and then basketball and then football. So like people pay attention to different ones in Argentina and Chile, and in a lot of like Europe and other countries. Soccer has just been the most important sport and just sort of stayed that way.
Yeah. And other sports are becoming popular too. Basketball is becoming slightly popular in Chile. So like as the years go by, other things are becoming more popular, but soccer always stays pretty consistently popular. How did Chile lose? They won against Spain 0-2, and the next game, I think they played the Netherlands, who were really good, and ended up losing, and so they didn't get to advance in the World Cup, and they were very jealous of Argentina's team because Argentina went to the finals.
We lost to Germany though. I don't actually remember what the score was, but I know it was very close, and it was like to the last minute, and somebody scored a goal.
Is soccer in U.S. different than in South America?
That's a good question.
I think one important thing is, that we don't have such a big fan base. So like you won't see as many people here like going out to watch soccer games. We also like don't, since there's not such a big fan base, we don't pour as much money into soccer as people spend more money on football teams and basketball teams. And those athletes make a lot of money and stuff.
As far as like the rules of the game and like the game itself, it's the same.
We just don't have as big of a focus on it, so I think that's why we're not usually as strong of a team.
Any other questions?
I can't tell what one. Okay.
Yeah, how did the U.S. team do this year? We did pretty well.
Yeah,
I think
we
were
actually
like
did
surprisingly
better than expected.
well. Yeah, which is kind of funny because like the people that I was staying with down there like to like kind of poke fun at the U.S.'s soccer team.
You already saw the how did they lose question.
Yeah. How old do you need to be to play professional soccer? Yeah, I don't know. I know there are some very young players, so they will get like 18-year-old players. I don't know if there's a rule about it, but I know the sort of general like age of soccer players is very young compared to I think other sports.
Yeah.
So like by the time players are like 25, 26, they're sort of like getting old.
Yeah, and like they don't have like how we have like college teams where a lot of players go and play in college and they move up to the more professional leagues. They don't really have that in Chile. They have the club teams and the national team.
That's sort of it's sort of like club and then national. So like you play club most of the time, and then if there's like a tournament like the World Cup, or they have other ones too, where the national team is playing, then they'll go play that.
Those are some great questions. Thanks for asking them. Have any more?
That's it. If any more, we can answer them later.
Okay. Thank you guys for listening, and
We'll see you next time.
have a good day.